Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Cassie from the Better Registry, and today we have a webinar called The Power of Advocacy, Making a Difference for the T1D Community. And we are very lucky today to have two wonderful speakers from Diabetes Action Canada. So first, I'll introduce you to Lindsay, who will be our main speaker for the English session. So Lindsay is the Director of Patient Engagement at Diabetes Action Canada, and she leads the largest diabetes patient engagement program in North America. She brings her lived experience with type 1 diabetes to the national initiatives that embed patient voices in research, policy, and care. Lindsay is the founder of the Research to Action Fellowship, a first of its kind program supporting patient advocates to co-create culturally relevant and accessible health tools. And she's worked with over 400 patient partners across Canada, and she was awarded the King Charles III Coronation Medal for her leadership in health equity and patient partnership. We also have with us today Laurie Lépine. Sorry. And Laurie recently joined Diabetes Action Canada as their Francophone Engagement Coordinator. She brings a strong background in patient advocacy, research, and community engagement. And this is also drawing from her lived experience with type 1 diabetes. She has passion for fostering inclusivity and addressing unique challenges faced by Francophone partners in the diabetes community. She also has a Master of Science in Occupational Therapy from the University of Montreal. And she's played an active role in many initiatives, including our Better Registry. And we're very excited to have you both here today. I will give just a quick, because this is open to all, a quick little word on the Better Registry. So the Better Registry is one part of the Type 1 Better project, and it's a Canadian initiative focused on research for people living with type 1 diabetes. And we collect a lot of valuable data to understand the realities and needs of people living with type 1. Anyone with type 1 is able to participate in the registry as well as parents of children with type 1. And really the reason to participate, our sort of reason for being is to improve the knowledge about type 1 diabetes and in the ways that we can use our data to help people access treatments and technologies through just a better understanding of what people are living with. And another great reason to participate is you get access to more webinars like these. So if you are interested in joining, you can go to type1better.com and I'll add that also into the chat. With all that said, Lindsay, welcome.
Thanks, Cassie. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to spend the next little bit with you virtually. I have nothing to add to Cassie's excellent introductions of both Laurie and I. I'm mostly excited to share some time and space and stories with you folks about why each person's story matters in the diabetes community, how to use your stories to raise awareness and shift perceptions, and ultimately sharing our lived experience to reduce the stigma that our community faces, to better influence research and policy through registries like Better and research projects. But ultimately, the goal of advocacy for me is for us to strengthen the support that we receive and we give to our friends and our family and ensure that everyone with diabetes belongs and feels that we belong to this community and we belong overall and we feel that we're not alone. So, what are we going to chat about today? First, about why it's important to share your story and how to share your story with a few examples, and how sharing your individual stories adds up to the power of our collective voices together. And give you some real examples of what that looks like in research and in programs that we run at DAC, ways to get involved on your own terms, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A, and I'd love to answer your questions to the best of my ability and to the best of Laurie's ability as well. So, why does your story matter? You'll notice that Laurie just did this webinar in French. If you ever watch the French recording or myself right now in English, we talk about storytelling. We don't necessarily say why your advocacy matters, and I'll say why a little bit later. But really, for me, it's important that everyone with diabetes or every family member or parent of people with diabetes knows that their story matters for several reasons. One, it puts a human face on type 1. It's in my experience, I got diagnosed at 25 years old. And very ironically, I did my undergrad thesis on gestational diabetes, my master's thesis on multiple kinds of diabetes. And I still, when I was 25 and I got diagnosed, my first question was, can I still have kids and can I still get married? I had the scientific knowledge. I just didn't really have a human face of type 1 in my life. And that's personally one of my reasons of why I share my story, to hope that other people have a human that they can think of when they think of type 1 diabetes. By sharing our stories, we challenge stereotypes and assumptions that people can make about people with diabetes. And also, when we share our stories with different audiences, like researchers or politicians, it helps to guide better research. And the ultimate goal is that the research that we do is then put in the hands of doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals so that they can give us better care. The biggest goal of all, when we receive better care, we can spend more of our time on life and less on diabetes, and that allows us to build community and belonging. It's really important also to mention that for me, even sharing my story is a big part of how I have built and continue to build community, because there's nowhere else that I feel like I belong more than in a room with other people with type 1 and their parents, because you just get it. It's a dialect that we all speak and understand. So, what are some ways to share your story in your way? There are three examples on the screen, and before I go into each of them, I want to emphasize it is not that one example or one way is better than another. All of them are equally valid. You might relate to one example more today, and then tomorrow you'll relate to another one. You're allowed to change your preferences. There's a lot going on. Diabetes is only one part of what we have to manage. So some days it might be easier for you to do personal level storytelling. Other days it might be that you really want to work with your community, and maybe, or maybe never, you want to do some national or global work. Any of the above are equally important and equally valid. So we'll start at the personal level. Talking to family and friends about your diabetes is advocacy. When Laurie and I were planning for this webinar, we both agreed like we need to make sure that it's storytelling is advocacy no matter where it happens. And for some of us, that storytelling might be telling your aunt that yes, you can eat dessert at Christmas. It might be telling your friend the real reason that you feel so exhausted is because your blood sugars have yo-yoed for the past 3 days, but you've been always really nervous to tell your friend about that. That is advocacy. Sharing on social media is an excellent example of personal level storytelling too. Laurie has some excellent examples on her social media about videos she's made in the past, sharing more about her diabetes experience. For me, I use a lot of LinkedIn social media and sharing my stories with colleagues who might have studied diabetes for 30, 40 years, but don't really understand what it's like to live with it. And that's where I feel most comfortable some days, not all the days. Um, and the other thing is personal advocacy with yourself is important as well. So writing in a journal and maybe showing it to nobody is storytelling. You're telling your story for yourself. Maybe you write it on a blog and you publish it. Phenomenal. Maybe you never publish it. I have a very dear friend who's a patient advocate, and she published a diabetes blog for 4 years under a fake name. And we had so many people that would read that blog every single day and did not know it was her. And that was her storytelling and her advocacy. And it made her relationship with her own diabetes better. So that's just as important and as valid as any of the other examples. The next example of how you can share your story is at the community level. You might want to join local support groups. So there's Facebook groups that are, for example, there's like type 1 and exercise, type 1 and pregnancy, type 1, and all sorts of different uh, support groups. There's also support groups that aren't online but are in person. I know Breakthrough T1D, so what used to be called JDRF, also does like in-person meetups at certain cities around the country. Where a bunch of people with type 1 or parents of kids with type 1 meet up once every couple months and just go to a restaurant together, and that's an excellent way of joining a local support group. You might also want to join organizations like the Better Registry or Diabetes Action Canada to contribute to designing research or tools with researchers, with doctors, nurses. I'll give you a concrete example a bit later of what that might look like, but it means really becoming a patient partner. So, what a patient partner is someone with lived experience, or what I like to call loved experience. So, you have someone in your family that you care about, or in your friends that you care about that has diabetes, and you bring that expertise and you work in a paid capacity to inform how a research project will be designed, how data is understood, also even what we study or how we share that information. No matter how big or small that community is, even if it's a community of like you're sharing it with one researcher, that is a community, and you are sharing your story and you're changing their worldview. You could also create resources with your peers and your friends. You don't need someone in the quote unquote system to give you permission to create stuff. Um, I always like to give an example. There's someone who's actually part of the Better Registry. His name is Alex St. John. He also is doing his PhD in diabetes and lives with diabetes. I will put his Instagram handle in the chat after. But Alex has an Instagram account where he creates little summaries of the research that happens in type 1. Sometimes he asks some of us in the community to help create those images with him. Sometimes he shares other opportunities. But that's an excellent example of building resources with your peers and with your friends and for your community. The other level of storytelling that you can do to share your story is at the national or global level. That might mean that you attend or speak at conferences like Diabetes Canada's conference that happens every November. It is the largest diabetes conference in the country and brings together researchers, doctors, nurses, dietitians, but also patient advocates. You might take part in national advocacy, like, for example, you might give your testimony on why insulin pump funding is very important and needs to change. You might give your testimony on why the policy needs to change around how we fund CGMs. In Ontario, for example, there's excellent examples of patient advocates who share their stories about it's not fair and safe that people need to report very dangerous lows to have their CGMs be funded. That means that you're either choosing your CGM or losing your job or your license. So you might share that story with CBC, for example, the media. You might share it at a Senate meeting to senators that are making decisions about this policy. Or you might share it in a petition. You might sign your name. There's a petition going around actually as of yesterday. Very short deadline until tomorrow, because there's a big meeting at the United Nations where they're talking about the future of health policy globally, and they have chosen to remove diabetes completely from all of the policies that they're negotiating next week. So there's a huge petition going around. I can share it in the chat about the diabetes community. saying, hey, you can't forget about diabetes. It's really important. So these are some examples of how you can share your story and where. What's important though is no matter what you decide, a few things. You don't have to share everything, that you don't actually have to share anything you don't want to share. And you can change your mind at any time. You could literally be on a podium at Diabetes Canada for all I care and say, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. I feel very uncomfortable. That is exceptionally valid. And you can change your mind at any time because it's your story. And you have the right to decide how it's shared, when it's shared, and you set the limits. So please remember that no matter what, your comfort matters and it's allowed to change. All of these examples contribute to collective impact. When each of us shares a little bit of our stories, and even if it means sharing your story because you are present, and we were joking before this call, I wear my sensor on my forearm. I know some people think that's wild, but I actually wear it on purpose when I'm able to. Because if I have the energy, I want other people in the wild to know that I have diabetes too. And I don't have to say any word for them to know that. They just see a sensor on me and they'll know I'm part of their community. So even if you share your story with no words, but just by being visible, it helps to grow awareness. All of a sudden, we know that there's another diabetic in the wild. It helps improve belonging. I know that from at least myself, there's no better feeling than being in line for a coffee and you see, or like yesterday I heard Laurie, sorry, today I heard Laurie's pump beep and I got so excited because I thought someone else at the coffee shop also had diabetes. I was like, oh my God, another one of us. We're taking over. It helps improve that feeling of belonging, like someone just understands. But also, it helps shift research priorities when we tell researchers our stories and we start to think about what should be studied that can really help our lives. And it improves healthcare services and the tools that are used to provide care for people with diabetes. So, what's one example of co creation and these tools? It's the Research to Action Fellowship. This is a purely community-led initiative. It's the first fellowship of its kind that is not for students, it's not for doctors, it's not for nurses, it's only for patient advocates. So for people with lived or loved experience, it's a paid program where a group of advocates is with us for about 9 months and receives training on a variety of topics from research to communications, advocacy, but most importantly, they take research and create community developed tools that hopefully make life with diabetes a bit easier for our communities. We ran this last year with a group of 8 fellows, and there was a bunch of resources that were created that you can download for free by scanning the QR on your screen. Such as comic books on living with type 2 diabetes and obesity. There's infographics on mental health and wearing devices. The example here visually on your screen of this purple, oh, pardon me. Um, this could you please explain that differently? I didn't quite understand. That's an example of our Indigenous self-advocacy flashcards. You can download them and print them at home yourself for free. They're all available online and all created by patient advocates with researchers and our staff supporting them. I checked actually the attendees today and I recognized some names of this year's fellows are attending. So thank you so much to all of you who are here today. They're working on some really cool stuff. A group of 10 amazing advocates working on tools to talk about looping and pumps, to talk about diabetes stigma, to talk about cell therapy, to talk about hormones and diabetes. So lots of different subjects. They all come from our patient. Now, if you're not a fellow, it doesn't mean that there's no way for you to get involved. So I'm going to give you some concrete examples of what you can do today and sign up for if you want to share your story. First, you can join the Better Registry. I think Cassie's able to share a link in the chat later on how you can join the Better Registry. There's ways where you can join monthly meetings to help guide research projects. You can also help researchers in the Better Registry team even interpret data. There is data in the Better Registry that maybe you're like, oh, well, as someone with diabetes, when I see this data, this is what I think of. I think we have to include this understanding. It's very important. You can join the Better Registry and contribute in that way. You can become a DAC patient partner. I'm going to ask Laurie to share the sign up link in the chat a little bit later, but it takes about 5 minutes to sign up on our website, and you then get email notifications anytime we have things like focus groups or surveys. There's two different co-design sessions. Tomorrow there's another one. And basically you receive invitations in your email, and if you are eligible, you can say, hey, I want to attend. Or if you're eligible and you don't want to attend, you don't have to. It's just a way to get involved in. At DAC, we worked with our patient partners to create the DAC Community Hub. It's basically a huge repository of all the different support networks that we could find um, online. And you can filter by where you live, by language, by subject, and find Instagram groups, charities, Facebook groups. And you can join a group and be silent if you want. Even joining a group is sharing your story. What's most important, though, is that you share your story in your way when you're ready. I always say when I give these presentations, even if you tell one person that didn't know before that you have diabetes, that's you sharing your story, and that's exceptionally powerful. I'd be even happier if you wore your sensor on your forearm because no judgment if you do. What's important though, and what we really appreciate about this collaboration with Better is that both of us as organizations have inclusivity at the heart of all that we do. Cassie mentioned earlier, this webinar is open to everyone. That's because we want to make sure that, yes, if you're already a participant in Better or if you're already a DAC patient partner, that's great. We are so thankful to have you. But it's just as, if not more important, for us to share these ways of getting involved with folks that have never heard of this before. So if you join today and you have no clue what the registry is, you don't know what DAC is, we're so happy that you're here. It's not required for you to sign up after this call. We hope that you learned something new today, and just know that at whatever level of participation you're at, your voice is welcome and you belong in our diabetes community. Now it's your turn because I've talked for far too long. Thank you so much for your attention. Please, it says raise your hand, but there's a Q&A function on your screen. Please feel free to put your questions in that Q&A function, and we will be happy to answer them. And then we'll also share some links in the chat for anyone that would like the resources that I mentioned. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was awesome. It's very impressive to see the number of ways not only DAC helps support advocacy, but also the little ways that you can do it in your life. So
Mhm.
that's excellent. All right. We have a comment from Linda. Thank you for doing your advocacy for all these years.
Yeah, so
We
Linda
love
says,
that.
Linda's been doing advocacy at the provincial and national level for 20 years, and you've had type 1 for 45 years and you're 71. First of all, very cool. Second of all, your diabetes is older than me, which is even cooler. Congratulations, Linda, and most of all, thank you very much for all that you've done for our community, and thank you for joining today.
Awesome. Anyone else has any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. And like Lindsay said, we have put a number of resources already in the chat. And if you just need clarification on what link is what, because there are very many, you can also feel free to ask that. Oh,
Hi,
Mhm.
Valentina. I'm wondering about families with type 1 and type 2. Looks like everyone in our family has this. So, Valentina, thanks so much for your question. Um, it's very common to actually have a variety of diabetes in a family. I know in my family, I'm the only one with type 1, but I have multiple family members with type 2. Um, and I think I always tell people, I think everyone knows someone with some sort of diabetes. It's one of those things. Um, I am thankful that I'm sure just by you attending today, there's something that you learned that you can share with your family or just be more informed. Um, if you ever want to share your experience or your family's experience with all these kinds of diabetes, please know that you can join Better, you can join DAC. We also do, I didn't mention specifically because this is a type 1 webinar. There's lots of projects that you can join that are type 2 specific. We even work, there was a researcher that reached out. Looking at type 2 diabetes in young children. There's really, if you think of the topic, there's a project or an organization working on it. So please feel free to get involved. And if you're ready to share your story or your experiences or what would help your family, there's definitely ways for you to get involved.
Perfect. Okay, we have another question. Okay, from Sandra who asked, oh, she said, I'm currently wearing a pedometer for 2 weeks for better. Happy to participate. How will this help researchers? Okay, this is a great question. I'm just looking. Sarah made a comment here. Um, okay, so there's currently a study on the number of steps a day in people with type 1
Mhm.
using, well, from data from people like Sandra who are living with type 1 in the Better Registry. I can't say directly what the outcomes of this study are, but surely we can reach out to whoever is conducting the study and get a better understanding. Thank you for asking. That's a very
I'll
interesting. Mhm.
jump in, Sandra, and just share with you something because there's patient partnership, which is like you're helping design the study and inform choices. That is equally as important as patient participation. So people like you who wear pedometers, try medications, etc. We couldn't do it without you, and your service is so important to the advancement of science and healthcare. My favorite example to give people. Um, because there's the what Cassie's speaking about, which is like the researchers will receive that data and figure out how the number of steps maybe help, or what strategies people with diabetes need, etc. But there's also, we must not forget, there's always stories to be uncovered in research that didn't go looking for in the first place, but that you can help us find. My favorite example is that for decades, we used to think that men just had more heart attacks than women because women never said that their chest hurt in research studies. And then about 40 years ago, there started to be more women in research studies, like Sandra, the one that you have joined, who started to say that their arms were hurting, not their chest. And it took more and more and more women to say this in research for us to accidentally find out that actually heart attacks in women were presenting as arm pain, not as chest pain. So I share that story because it's important that you know that your participation is directly benefiting the research question on number of steps in diabetes, but never underestimate the stories that are still there to be uncovered with the help of people with diabetes that maybe we didn't ask the question right away, but we notice it as the people with the expertise. We're like, wait a second, there's something else there. So your participation is very important.
Mhm. Absolutely. All right.
Awesome. So I see, Dave, you have type 1 and you've been type 1 for 61 years and you're 75. Another person who's type 1 is older than me. I admire you all. You have a friend that's also 75 and has had type 1 for 66 years. Honestly, Dave, if I could be you when I grow up, that's my goal. I want to be 75 with a buddy that's also had diabetes for a long time. Thank you so much for being here. All right. So, Sally, there's a question about cancer treatment toxicities left you with type 1. Although old, that's Sally's word. I would not call you old, Sally. You're a relatively new member of this community since you were diagnosed in 2022. You do a lot of work as a person with lived cancer experience, but haven't done much with the Type 1 community. You did help with the Indigenous flashcards. Thank you. I actually recognized your name. What else can you do is what you're asking yourself. Well, Sally, first of all, you're not old. Second of all, even if you're a new member, I tell people if you've had diabetes for 3 minutes, you're part of the community. It literally doesn't matter. If you've had diabetes for 70 years, you're super cool. We admire you. You also belong. So thank you for being here and thank you for contributing to the flashcards. We're running the fellowship again, so I will say there's a focus group today at 4 o'clock led by someone who's part of the Better Registry, Alex. There's one on cell therapy at 4, and then at 8 o'clock tonight, there's one on hormones and diabetes. So if you want to get involved, please send us an email. I'll make sure to add you. I will mention all of these opportunities between Better and DAC are paid because this is work. So it's important to just mention that. Sometimes I forget to say it because it's just something that is true, but I will mention it. If you haven't joined the registry yet, I encourage you to join the registry because you never know what you can contribute to there. And then there's also another just co-design session happening Wednesday at 4 o'clock Eastern on pumps and algorithms and diabetes for anyone on the call that might be interested. These are just like immediate opportunities for people to um, uh, get involved.
Wow. Busy, busy.
Okay, Valentina, with type 1 you've had for 48 years and your daughter 15 years. Where can you find places to help with research? Laurie just put some links in the chat. I think Sarah also put the links in the chat. Um, Honestly, like if you join Better, I'll ask Sarah or Cassie to just put it in the chat again just to make it easier. Or if you just join DAC as a patient partner, um, you will receive notifications for opportunities for you to help with research. Um, and we'd love to have you. I see, Linda, you've asked about the medical community not checking for inflammation. You had to go through a lot of pain before a naturopath diagnosed it. I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And it's interesting you say that. We had a focus group last night on people who have had a hard time getting the right diagnosis. And this came up quite a bit, actually, that a lot of people went through a lot of pain before they got diagnosed with diabetes, and naturopaths helped them along the way. I encourage you, Linda, to sign up as a patient partner or through the registry because there are often researchers who come to us and say, we don't know what to study next, what matters to the community. And that's why it really helps when we have patient partners, part of our communities that say, hey, inflammation really matters, or getting the right diagnosis earlier really, really matters. So please join, and hopefully we'll move towards more research in that area. And I see Helen has asked if late onset counts as type 1. I'm going to share with you, Helen, the average age of type 1 diagnosis in Canada right now is 34 years old. I work with patient partners who got diabetes, type 1 diabetes, in their mid 80s. They, you, me, we are all just as diabetic as the rest of us. I understand where your question comes from because there's been a very long time where people would say, oh, well, it's just the kind that kids get. Um, but with the leadership and advocacy of the diabetes community. That's an excellent example of the progress we've made. It was years of advocacy that also led to the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation changing their name to Breakthrough T1D, because we know it's not just a juvenile condition. So please know that it absolutely counts as type 1. There's so many kinds of diabetes. There's almost a dozen kinds. We just hear type 1 in kids and type 2 more often, but with events like this and our research, we're slowly but surely changing attitudes and beliefs around who can get diabetes and who can't.
I will add also, we usually when we talk about the better registry, we say for people with type 1, it does also carve out it's type 1 and LADA or
Yeah,
latent autoimmune diabetes in the adult. So yes, you are definitely welcome in the better registry with later onset diabetes.
yeah.
Thank you for all the engagement and questions, everyone. That was excellent.
Oh, Alex is here. Alex, I've been talking about you like
I
you
put his
haven't been
Instagram in the
here.
chat.
Hi, Alex. Yeah, Alex is awesome. Alex has a session at 4.
Perfect. All
That's
right.
so funny.
Okay, well, obviously there are a lot of opportunities to get involved. Maybe it's a little bit slightly overwhelming. Hopefully people can take advantage of some of the links in the chat.
Yes.
Um, if there aren't any other questions for people who are already part of the Better Registry or end up joining the Better Registry, we have another webinar like this coming up in August on gastroparesis specifically. So again, that will be for people who have participated in Better. So if you have, we'd love to see you there for that as well. Again, I want to thank both of you for coming. Great collaboration with DAC. You guys do such great work. And I like that you also mentioned that if you have family members or people living with type 2 or other types of diabetes, DAC also has programs specifically for that. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Lindsay and Laurie. And
Thanks,
if there's no,
Cassie. I'll just quickly mention, just because
yeah,
I see a comment from Keith, another super cool diabuddy who has diabetes that's older than I am, 65 years with type 1, and you're 73 years old. There's a Facebook group called Type 1 Diabetes for 50 plus year olds with over 2,000 members. I will make sure, Keith, Lori, and I will make sure that that's in our community hub. Um, we'll get that in there. We have about 200 different Facebook groups in there. I bet you there's 1,000 more that we don't know of. So, thank you very much for sharing.
awesome. Right, I'll give everyone one more minute in case there's a last minute question. See, I think Sarah is writing something here. Okay. Okay, I think that'll be that. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Enjoy your summer.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.